Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Thursday, November 14th, 2013, and here are our top stories.
Tonight, how the TSA is wasting their breath and $1 billion of your tax dollars. Then, NSA snoops take down a U.S. computer business. And Mancal's bombshell revelation about Obama. That's next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
You know what it's like to go to sleep every night knowing you work for a bunch of psychotic killers and you bastards are probably going to end up killing me one day? You know what it's like knowing you've ruined my life? You know what it's like?
Well, in our top story tonight, we learned that the TSA has spent $1 billion on a program that doesn't do anything. What a surprise. Yes, according to the GAO, the screening of passengers by observation techniques, check out that acronym, it's SPOT. Now, that's worth at least $1 million right there. But that program, the SPOT program, is no better than chance. And they've spent $900 million on it in the last 6 years. But that's, I guess, that makes the naked body scanners not look like such a bad deal. I mean, we wasted $1 billion on them, and at least we got some hardware for that. I mean, this is just money that's going out to psychiatrists for a program that has absolutely no effect. Neither do any of their other programs, the screening, the invasive pat-downs, and yet there's been no incidents. But of course the TSA knows that. We've reported multiple times about the lawsuit that John Corbett brought against the TSA, and in that the government accidentally posted the unredacted version that had references to their own documents where they said that there are no terrorist threats against airplanes or airports, that the terrorists are just engaged in fundraising, recruitment, and propagandizing. Well, that's exactly what the TSA is doing. Propagandizing, fundraising, and recruiting. It's just a big bureaucracy wasting your money, harassing you, and putting their hands on you to train you like slaves. And whether it's a TSA or another government agency, the one thing they want is to get information on their slaves. That's you. We learned from McClatchy that Americans' personal data is being shared with the CIA, the IRS, and others in a security probe. They report that U.S. agencies collected and shared the personal information of thousands of Americans in an attempt to root out untrustworthy federal workers. This ended up scrutinizing people who had no direct ties to the U.S. government and simply had purchased certain books. Well, this kind of makes the government look like conspiracy theorists, doesn't it? And yet that's the way they operate with the FISA program. Anybody that knows someone, anyone who they think might be doing something suspicious, they follow them, which means that they follow everybody. That's how we get these dragnet searches. And as we learned earlier this week in an exclusive story from INFOWARS, it's not just on the internet. It's not just on your cell phones. It's also when you're talking in public, when you're walking in public. They have voice recording. They have facial recording, facial recognition, voice recognition. They're looking at everything you do when you're in public. So it's a total pervasive surveillance state. It's an infrastructure of tyranny that we see being constructed right now, and we know how this is going to go if we don't roll this back. Now, even though the government thumbs its nose at public opinion and the law, we see that in the marketplace, it is having some consequences for companies that play along with this intrusive, illegal activity by the government. Kurt Nemo reports in INFOWARS that the NSA snooping is taking down the profits of a U.S. computer networking business. In October, it was reported that the NSA had a backdoor into some Cisco products. And on Thursday, Cisco released their unexpected 10% sales drop of the current quarter. And they said it's not only the only factor, but Cisco says a backlash over U.S. surveillance has definitely hit orders in China. And orders in other developing countries have also plummeted. And again, the NSA is being cited as a possible factor. That's from David Meyer writing for Gigacom. And could it be that even teenage consumers are starting to understand the need for privacy and that there's a backlash on that? It's been reported many times that teenagers are starting to leave Facebook in massive quantities. Why? Because their information is there to get them in trouble with the school, with their parents, even with other teenagers. And so they're increasingly going to another service, Snapchat. Facebook reportedly offered $3 billion to buy Snapchat. Now, that's amazing considering that Snapchat has $0 of revenue. But its popularity is soaring amongst teens, and perhaps they're looking at the privacy that Snapchat offers. Once your messages or your photos go up, they only last for a few seconds and then they disappear, unlike the Utah data center. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's the marketplace, and entrepreneurs are realizing that there is a market out there for privacy. People are very upset about what the NSA is doing, and if the government is not going to rein itself in and start acting within the law, people are going to protect themselves. That's why you see the rise of things like dark mail and dark wallet and Bitcoin. All these different things are coming up to allow people to get out from underneath this surveillance state that's developed. Now, the government has talked about the disappointment in the number of people that have signed up for Obamacare. Obama had a special event today where he talked about what he's going to do about it. But as we look at these figures, the figures that were released yesterday, that 100,000 people have signed up, personally, I don't find that credible at all. Nancy Pelosi has already inflated that by a factor of 5 and said it's 500,000. We know from marketplace.org that the goal of the Obama administration was to have about 500,000 people sign up into their program, and yet they're saying their official number, the number that they're going to stick with at the moment, is 100,000. I think it's far less than that. We're seeing dozens of people sign up state by state, and yet we know that millions of people have lost their insurance. But, you know, like Stalin said, to paraphrase Joseph Stalin, if 1 million people lose their insurance, it's just a statistic. But if one person loses their insurance, it's a tragedy. It certainly is for this lady who's suffering from cancer in Orlando. Here's that report.
Gloria Cancer has cancer just about everywhere,
as well as 5 brain tumors.
She's made significant progress while at MD Anderson, but now her lifeline, her treatment there, could be cut off.
This letter make more problems for us than we don't need in this moment.
This letter says due to the Affordable Care Act, her current plan will end next summer.
We were thrown under the bus.
A real tragedy, but as her husband pointed out elsewhere in that interview, they're being required to buy a plan that covers things like pediatric care, even though they have no children, or maternity, even though this lady is dying from cancer. And of course, drug abuse programs. All of these things are why people's insurance rates are doubling, even sometimes going up as much as a factor of 5. It's becoming as much as a house payment. So, of course, people are not going to be buying new houses. They're not going to be buying new cars because they're going to be buying insurance from an insurance company that they don't need. People who don't have children are going to be forced to buy pediatric care and so forth. So that's pure profit for the insurance companies, never going to have to pay off on those claims. And yet Obama is telling us that he's going to ease up a little bit on his mandates. The dictator-in-chief is going to graciously give us 1 more year before he starts canceling plans, he said today. But look at the details here from the Wall Street Journal. What actually came out, what he said was insurers can offer customers the option to renew their 2013 health care plans in 2014, allowing these individuals to keep their plan. Do you understand what's going on here? Insurers wouldn't be able to sell so-called substandard plans, but they would be allowed to let people extend their plans. Not required to, mind you. This is all, again, at the discretion of the insurance companies because this was written to inflate insurance companies' profits. So this isn't, they're going to allow the insurance companies to decide whether or not they want to keep somebody who's dying of cancer on their current plan, or would they like to double or quintuple their insurance rates? What do you think they're going to do? Why do we allow Obama to dictate to us what insurance plans we can buy, what kind of coverage we have to get? Who is this guy anyway?
Mancow, thank you so much for coming on with us today, and repeat what you said on your radio show to me about Harry Lennox.
He said that Obama shadowed him, that he couldn't shake him. It was kind of like a booger on your finger is kind of the feeling I got, that he couldn't shake him, and that there's nothing there, and that's the point I wanted to make about abused children, that you know, in order to protect themselves, they want to make everybody happy. So as I sat talking to Obama, you know, he was Christian with me, he was Muslim with the next person that came over and talked to him, and he's whatever you want him to be, but there's nothing there. And that's basically what Lennox was saying. There's nothing there. He's an empty vessel. He's whatever you want him to be. And perfect to be manipulated, a perfect puppet. And he says, Mancow, do I remind you of him? And I said, well, I don't want to say anything. He goes, oh, yeah, because all black people are the same. And he's laughing some more. He goes, man, Cal, Barack Obama is me. He goes, you've seen me on TV. You've seen me in movies. He is me. And I said, what are you talking about? What are you saying? He goes, do I remind you of Obama? And I said, well, yeah, you do. He goes, he mimicked me. He followed me for years. And they wanted me to train him and teach him how to act. This is Harry Lennox's words. Lennox is a brilliant actor. And if you watch him, that's what Obama's supposed to act like.
Well, that was an amazing segment today on the Alex Jones Show. Mancow confirming what many of us have been saying about Obama all along, that basically he is an empty suit puppet, a kind of Manchurian candidate that's been selected by his CIA family to essentially destroy the American economy. And he's doing it by destroying your choices about health care, among other things. But it's not just the insurance companies that are getting wealthy off of Americans. There's a massive transfer of wealth, of course, to the banks as well. Now, in an amazing PR blunder that was caught by Kit Daniels, J.P. Morgan Chase begs for mercy while not giving us any. They decided that it would be a good idea to have a question and answer program for their vice president, and they put this out on Twitter. Give us your questions. And people were coming back with things like this. Any plans to return illegally foreclosed homes to their rightful owners? If not, how do you justify your continued existence? Or do you have an org chart that's perfectly analogous to the criminal underworld? You know, capo, made man. Or do you just wing it? Does it feel any better paying the biggest bank fines in history so far, or did satisfaction of the crimes outweigh the fines? And as the article points out, earlier this year, the U.S. Attorney's Office opened criminal and civil investigations for fraud against J.P. Morgan for overstating their assets prior to the 2008 crisis. And that's still going on today. They have $1.95 trillion in assets, although they have $71 trillion in derivatives. As the article points out, that's 36 times what J.P. Morgan Chase owns, and this exposure is more than enough to crash the American economy. It's worse than the situation before the 2008 financial crisis. Well, it was back in August this year that we reported on the death of Dr. Bob Bowman. Now, yesterday, he was buried in Arlington Cemetery in a memorial service. Dr. Bowman was a 9/11 truth scholar. He was also a veteran whose career had spanned nearly 5 decades, including his service as the former director of Advanced Space Programs Development, also known as Star Wars. Now, in that, he was amazed that the government was using it not for the defensive purposes that they were talking about, but for purely offensive purposes. He was a man of peace. He was a man of intellectual honesty. He said about 9/11, the most unbelievable of all of the wild conspiracy theories is the one our government has told us. He was a member of Scholars for 9/11 Truth and very outspoken critic of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he also told people to question the government's narrative about what happened with NORAD. He was very focused on that being glossed over in the 9/11 reports. Here's some of that ceremony.
I'll now begin to ring the bell 11 times, and I ask that you all think and reflect on Dr. Bowman's work for peace and what we might be able to do to honor that and continue his work. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, stay tuned. Right after the break, we're going to talk to James Babb. He's got a guerrilla marketing campaign going on in Washington, D.C., in the heart of the beast, telling jurors what juries are really about. So stay tuned.